Hey OSC family, Pastor Josh here. We are on day 2 of our 21 days of seeking God through prayer, fasting, and devotions. I hope it's going really good for you. I hope you had a good kickoff yesterday. I know our family did. It's been great. And today we are in Matthew chapter 3 and chapter 4. And I just want to bring just a couple thoughts to you. These are two great chapters, but I want to bring you to Matthew chapter 3, verse 13, the baptism of Jesus. And then I want to show you how that parallels with the temptation of Jesus in Matthew chapter 4. And I don't know if you've ever linked those two together, but I want to show you something real powerful. In Matthew chapter 3, it's the story of Jesus' baptism. And you see in verse 16, it says, "And when Jesus was baptized, immediately he went up from the water, and behold, the heavens were opened to him." Imagine what that was like. The heavens open as soon as he comes up out of the water. And it says that the Spirit of God descended on him like a dove, coming and resting upon him. In verse 17, this is the big key. It says, "And behold, a voice from heaven." Who is that? That's God the Father. He says in an audible voice, "This is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased." Now that is a big deal. We know that because Jesus hasn't performed any miracles yet. And God is saying, "You are my beloved Son." You know, this past weekend we talked about that God so loves us, that we are his beloved and he is ours, and that he so loves us. And here he affirms that to his own Son, Jesus. He says, "You are my beloved, and I'm so well pleased with you." Not because of anything that you've done, because you haven't done anything yet, but I'm well pleased with you because you're mine. You're my Son. And God's saying that to you and to I, that we are his children, and he is in love with us, not because of what we come to give to him, or not because of anything that we do for him, but he's in love with us because we are his. And that's a great truth that we need to sink deep down into our hearts. And I'm going to tell you why. Because now you go over into chapter 4, verse 1. It says, "The Spirit of the Lord led Jesus into the wilderness." Now, you got to stop there. It was the Spirit of God that led Jesus into the wilderness. He's obeying God, and he gets brought into the wilderness. You know what? We believe a lie oftentimes that if we follow God and if we love Jesus, that we're not going to face anything. But that's not the truth. Following Jesus sometimes means that there's seasons of wilderness. Have you ever been there? You're trying to seek the Lord, and we find that that's happening to Jesus. He goes to the wilderness and he fasts for 40 days and 40 nights. That's just like what we're doing right now. And he's at the end of his fast, and guess who shows up on the scene? The Bible says that he's fasting 40 days and 40 nights and that he's hungry. And the tempter comes and says to him, "If you're the Son of God." Now, notice something here. The very thing that the devil challenges in Jesus' life is the very thing that the Father just affirmed in Jesus' life. Chapter 3, Jesus comes out of the water. The Father says, "I love you. I am pleased with you." Chapter 4, he goes into the wilderness. He's fasting. He's hungry. And the devil says, "If you're the Son of God." You know, all of the temptations, at the heart of every temptation, is the challenging of the affirmation of our Father. Every challenge, every temptation that the enemy brings your way is, if you're this, if you're that, why don't you do this, why don't you do that? We hear lies all the time, and it's always about the challenging of the fact that we are God's and he is in love with us. And you see that in verse 3, you see it again in verse 6. The enemy comes again and says, "If you're the Son of God, do this. If you're the Son of God, do that." And Jesus always comes back to the fact of his affirmation. He knows that he is loved. That is what gave Jesus the strength to stand. And for you and I, if we will come to the Father and get the affirmation like Jesus did in chapter 3, we can stand in chapter 4 when the enemy comes against us. Now know this, that the enemy came to him when he was hungry, when he was isolated, and when he was tired. And those are the 3 times that he's definitely going to come after you: when you're hungry, when you're isolated, when you're by yourself. Notice that the enemy likes to take us off when we're on our own and begin to lie to us. And when we're tired, when we're physically weak, when we're exhausted, we've been working so much, when so much is going on in our lives, that the enemy comes and he begins to lie to us. And so we need to be mindful of that. But we need to remind ourselves of the gospel. That is that Jesus did what we couldn't do, and that he loves us not because of what we do, not because of what we bring, but because of who we are. And so during these next 21 days in your fast, I pray that you would be reminded that you are so loved, and that if you can anchor that truth deep down into your heart, you can face anything, because greater is he who is in us than he that is in the world.